October is rough. And when you look at 2-2, there's going to be a big difference in going into that 3-2 compared to 2-3. Like, you really feel like South Carolina needs a win, no matter how it happens. But I know what you mean, though. Like, if they have to battle through it, that could be good for them. But I feel like they need a win just for, like, the morale of the team and to really try and set themselves up for the bye week that's coming next week, and then an October that is going to be tough. Welcome onto the sideline, everybody. Matt Dowell and Claire Foley with you guys for another game day preview as South Carolina takes on Kentucky this Saturday night. Another night game at Williams-Brice Stadium. It's been
better get your naps
Yeah,
in.
right. We've been staying up late in Columbia this football season, but love the night atmosphere at Williams-Brice Stadium. As you guys know, I think it's one of the most underrated atmospheres in college football, no matter what. I expect it to be electric once again on Saturday, and I think, Claire, South Carolina, the team is going to need the fan base to really show up on Saturday.
I was just going to say that. Like, I was going to say, we're going to get into it, but I think it's exactly what they need right now. They need the energy of the fans behind them, motivating them, and it's obviously the home field advantage to have that atmosphere, and especially when you're going against a redshirt freshman quarterback who has only had one start in his career. I think it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, it's sold out, at Williams-Brice Stadium once again on Saturday, so it's going to be interesting to see how South Carolina shows up, because let's just be honest, Claire, it's been kind of a negative couple of weeks here in Columbia. They started 2-0, but after the Vandy loss, which was a blowout, you had Lenoris's injury. Then they go to the other Columbia, take on Missouri, didn't play well, but they were leading late in that game, and then it all just kind of fell apart at the end as Missouri was the more polished team, and they were able to win. We talked about that in our instant reaction episode. But South Carolina now has had a couple of games where the same problems are showing up, and that's not a one-off. That shows, okay, there's a deeper issue with why these things are consistently happening, and I'm really curious to see how they come out and if we see any adjustments and any changes, any improvements against Kentucky.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is just it feels like they're not dotting their I's and crossing their T's, and you see positive things throughout a whole game, but not necessarily prolonged stretches, and the ability to have sustained consistency throughout an entire game. And I think that's something that they touched on this week was it's not necessarily an effort thing. It's not necessarily always a focus thing, but they're just not quite able to finish. And listening to shanebeamer talk about that yesterday. Are you a Big Bang Theory guy?
I'm not.
You're not? Well, it reminded me of, maybe you guys at home will know this. There's an episode where Amy is trying to teach Sheldon to be okay with things like not finishing and ending cleanly the way you want to. And so she goes through like all these tests with him, like these scenarios. And like one of them that comes to the top of my head was playing or singing the national anthem. And it's like, and the home of the, and just ends there. And it drives him crazy that he's not able to finish it. And I feel like that's kind of what South Carolina fans are feeling right now. Like, they're okay, we're getting there. And then it's, okay, anybody else? Like, and they're just not able to get over that.
Unfinished.
Yes, unfinished. And I was looking at the box scores of all four games so far, and it really has been like a second half kind of thing. In all four games, either in the third or fourth quarter, they have not put up any points. Yeah. And so against Virginia Tech, it was the third quarter. SC State, it was the first and the fourth quarter. Vandy, it was second, third, and fourth quarter. And then against Missouri, it was the first and fourth quarter. And so it's just this ability to, one, obviously you want them to lock in early and stay locked in, but to come out of the locker rooms and finish the game, finish what they started. And that's what Beamer talked about this week was they were leading going into the fourth quarter, and it's just like, okay, work here's done. And I know that's not how they're actually viewing it.
Absolutely.
That's not how they're feeling. I'm not saying these guys don't care, but it comes in the ability to play every single snap.
Yeah, absolutely. First, also, can we give a shout out to the singing chops? You just dropped the national anthem on our podcast.
We were actually going to start every podcast by me singing the national anthem.
I mean, I was like, all right, just breaking out the Star Spangled Banner.
Okay, Whitney.
All right, let's go. But now I don't remember what we're talking about. Oh, yes, scoring. So I think, it's one of those things, too. I feel like we talked ad nauseum about the issues, between our game day previews and the instant reactions. The run game it's not even bad. I mean, it's non-existent,
right.
So for me, it's like you're 4 games in, a third of the way through the season. How much can you really change it at this point? Because the weeks go by so fast. They only have so much time to do it. Can you completely change how you do things? I don't know. I don't know if that's possible, but I do know that it's going to be really hard to win SEC games if you have negative rushing yards and really have no run game whatsoever. So I don't know if it's about changing the offense, and I also don't really know if they have an offensive identity, which is maybe the bigger issue. When you look at these other SEC teams, you see what they're working with. You see their strengths. You see, their go-to guys, their go-to plays, yada, yada, yada. I don't think we've seen that with South Carolina. It still is kind of like, what is the plan? And I think that's the confusing part. But with the run game, they have to do something, whether it's getting Oscar Attaway and Faison the ball more, whether it's running Lenore's more. I don't know. It's just they have to have something going. But for me, the question is, I don't know if you can change that at this point in the season. How hard is that?
Yeah. And that's something that he was asked about yesterday is like, okay, is it like a personnel thing?
First question, by the way. First question of the press conference.
Yeah. Is it a personnel thing? Is it a coaching thing? And what are they able to do? And he said, they're able to do both, but to what extent? What does that look like? Obviously, that's not something they're going to tell us.
Yeah.
Their whole game plan of what they have going forward. But logistically speaking, in how fast these weeks move by, and obviously you're trying to, and he said they're focusing on them as much as more so than they are their next opponent. But you also still have to take that into account.
Yeah.
I think what is concerning is, like you said, it's not just that the run game is non-existent, but pass game isn't really there either. Like it's
got
not
better
like,
against Missouri.
Yes, but it's not like you have, okay, you're losing 50% of your offense, but we're making up for it on this side.
Yeah.
It's like this side's okay. But you need that support there. And where you're seeing the discrepancies is teams are out rushing them by 70 yards a game.
That's a lot.
And going over some more stats for you here. So they've lost 152 yards running, while their opponents have only lost 84. I've talked about the third down conversions every week now. They're now down below 30% on third down conversions. Meanwhile, their opponents are at 46. Kentucky's at 44%. So it's not like you're getting any slack there coming up this week. Passing yards worked better for Kentucky's opponents. So maybe that's where they get a little bit of an advantage.
Yep.
Kentucky's not as strong in defending that way, but their opponents are not getting anywhere in terms of rushing. Mm-hmm. So it's not like this week is necessarily going to be where they fix the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the offense has so many question marks still. Mm-hmm. And we're going into week 5. And again, it's how do they adjust? How do they fix these stats? Because the stats are not good. Right. And I mean, I don't think it's like an opinion thing. I think it's just like
the numbers are the numbers.
Yeah, here are the numbers. Yeah. And I think you can't hide from that. They are what they are. And it's also interesting too, how like a couple of moments kind of change everything. Because if Mazio catches that ball and runs in a touchdown, if on the 1 yard line, the 2 yard line, they score a touchdown, they probably win that game. And then maybe everything's different, but they did not do those things. And then you see all of the problems, all the penalties, all the negative yards. Yep. And then now we're back to this. And so it's interesting how a couple of moments not happening for the Gamecocks have really impacted the season.
That's what I was going to say. They're not doing themselves any favors either. If you take a look at South Carolina and Kentucky in terms of just penalties, South Carolina has 37 penalties through 4 games, Kentucky 16. And what, South Carolina had 14 against
14.
Missouri?
14.
So, almost match Kentucky's season total in penalties in one game.
You said 37?
37 for South Carolina.
37. What's 37 divided by 4? That's about 9, a little over 9. Yes? My math, yes. I think it's 9.
Yes, because 44, yep.
Oh, gosh.
We talk for a living.
Everyone
we
watching
don't
this
do
is
math.
like, all right.
If they had the solo cam on me for that, I was like, panic numbers.
9 times 4, 36. So that is the negative. And again, we all know the numbers. We all have the opinions. The staff is aware. Now it's kind of, for me, it's just... Now we just got to see what they do.
Right.
Do they fix it? Do they adjust? Do they improve? I do, though, because it has been such a negative week. And I mean, at the press conference yesterday, we're filming this on a Wednesday. At the press conference, it was a lot of, what do you do? How do you fix it? It was a lot of those kinds of questions. And honestly, that's just the vibe. And I think all of those questions are fair. And when you only have 30 minutes with a coach, for his weekly press conference, you have to get to the questions that everyone wants to know. But I do want to take a second to look at the positives, because I did think that the receiver core was a positive, because it wasn't just Nick Harbor. We saw some other guys step up and make big catches. So if there is a positive, Claire, I think it's the fact that we saw more receivers step up. We saw more depth at that position. And I think that is a good sign for South Carolina's offense, that it's not just, okay, if Nick Harbor's not open, what happens? We saw Dre Jacobs, we saw Brian Rowe, we saw these other guys get involved. And if there is a positive to take away on the offensive side, I think it's that.
And I think that's kind of what Beamer was talking about. The question was more so targeted towards Lenoris in talking about his ability to run, and saying that teams are just studying up on him and what he's been able to do. And they are game planning for that. And that's what they're doing for especially Nick Harbor too, because they know they can't let him get past him, because if he gets past him, he's gone. Yeah. And so it's maybe that's the start of what we're looking for in terms of their ability to make those changes mid-season, mid-game, adjust to, okay, this is how teams are game planning for us. Now we got to go back to the drawing board a little bit to see how we're going to counter that.
Yeah. Shane Beamer addressing the offense. It was the big storyline, and in the press conference yesterday, he answered a lot of questions about the offense, fixing the run game, about the receiver core. Here's what Shane Beamer had to say about both of those things as they get ready for Kentucky.
Yeah, I think it's always happening, and clearly when you perform like we did the other night, David, it's not as simple as just, we just need to do this a little bit better. There's some serious issues when you rush for negative yards and you haven't been able to run the ball consistently enough. So like I told our coaches, there's a 4-game body of work that says it's not good enough, and now we have to fix it. And how do you do that? You continue to build on some of the things that we are doing well. It's maybe tweaking personnel in some areas. It's tweaking schemes in some areas, but it's not let's go in here and blow things up. But 1 or 2 games, you can say, okay, it's a work in progress, and it still is a work in progress, but 4 games body of work is nowhere near good enough, and we have to be better. And that's certainly things you can do in 1 week, whether, like I said, personnel, scheme, tweaks, coach something a little bit better. You're looking at it all. And that's everywhere. That's offense, defense, and special teams. It was good. We had we knew we wanted to throw the ball downfield. That was our plan going into it. I'm probably going to feel this way every week, that with our receivers and our tight ends, we need to take shots downfield, because we got guys that can make plays in the passing game, and we got a quarterback that can get the ball down there. So we wanted to throw the ball downfield. The one to Dre that got us down there to the 2-yard line, that was a 3rd and 2 play, if I'm not mistaken, where I'm getting ready to go for it on 4th down. So Mike knew we had 2 downs, so we maxed it up and ran a 2-man just shot play and hit Dre on the ball down to the 2-yard line. So we've got to be able to do that. Now, if we can get this running game going, then really watch out, because now we've got a run game that people have to be respectful of. And the ability to throw the ball over your heads, that's where we need to get to. But certainly when you have a quarterback like Lenoir, so we've got good offensive linemen, we got a good running backs, we got a quarterback that can run. There's a running threat. We're just not executing well enough right now, obviously. But I do believe we're close, and as we continue to, it's the old adage now, everybody, you always hear, like, you run the ball to, set up the pass. Maybe we're throwing the ball to set up the run. Who knows? But we, and again, I'd love to line up every night and run the ball for 300 yards. That would be awesome. But it's hard to run the ball in this league. And you say, well, hold on, Shane. Missouri just ran for 300. And you're right. But it's hard to run. But we can't be stubborn and bang our head against the wall. We want to run the ball efficiently, but we certainly don't want to prove a point about how we can run the ball all of a sudden be 3 yards in a cloud of dust and not take advantage of these receivers and tight ends that we have on this team also that can do a lot of things on the passing game also.
So now let's talk about the other side of the ball, because Claire, last week, you and we kind of gave the defense the benefit of the doubt. You know, they've been so consistently good for the last 12, 14 months that all those missed tackles in a weird Vanderbilt game that had a weird vibe, we said, okay, let's see if this is a one-off, like Clayton White said he kind of felt it was, or is this going to become a consistent problem? And Claire, I said this in our instant reaction episode on Sunday. I could not believe all of the missed tackles. I mean, it was a lot. And don't get me wrong, Missouri's running backs, fantastic. You know, they are a good team. But it was a lot of missed tackles, and almost like at a fundamental level. You know, I couldn't figure out what was going on, and I think everyone was watching being like, man, there were just so many. And so for me, it went from, okay, this is not just a one-off now, this is becoming a theme. You know, It's been 8 quarters against 2 SEC teams where the tackling has just frankly been bad. And so now it's, how does the defense, you know, that was the kind of the side of the ball that maybe wasn't getting asked question, and now it's how do they fix that, because it was not good against Missouri. It was not good.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying before about not finishing.
Yeah.
It's like, and that was, again, something that Beamer was asked about, and the reporter asked, is it they're just not getting enough reps in that area? And he said, no, if anything, that's like the most we do. And he said it's just maybe they think, oh, he's already down, somebody else got it. And it just needs to be that everyone is doing their job on every play and finishing the play until it's actually over.
Yeah, it was interesting. Also, that reporter was Jared.
Oh, was it? Yeah. I thought it was somebody else. That's what I did say. Oh, that's funny.
It was
like this guy.
This guy that we.
I'm not going to promote him.
Yeah.
I thought it was somebody else. That's
So anyway, good segue.
Shout out Jared.
Yeah, shout out Jared Parker, because he did ask about the tackling. So let's hear what Shane Beamer had to say to Jared's question about why the tackling's been such an issue these last 2 weeks.
No, I mean, I'd say we get more reps at tackling than most people do. I'd say we do more live tackling in practice than most teams do in the spring and the preseason, and most teams don't do a ton of live tackling in season, but we have in the past, and certainly want to be able to continue to also. I think it's just it's a little bit of everything. Don't think it's an effort issue at all. I don't think anybody could watch our game against Missouri the other night and question how hard our guys played. I mean, we were ready to play, and how much our guys wanted it. If I don't think anybody could question that, but I think there were too many examples the other night of guys just assuming that somebody was on the ground and didn't finish the play like they needed to play. It wasn't because of a lack of want to or a lack of effort. Just got to get off blocks, and you can't assume that somebody's got it. We got to do a better job of all 11 being around the ball, but it's something that we emphasize all the time. And we've been a good tackling team here in my time, I feel like, and we haven't done a good enough job of it the last couple of weeks. But, you know, particularly last week against Missouri, I mean, let's give that guy a lot of credit too. I mean, not many, he's, you know, one like he all of a sudden just showed up out of nowhere Saturday night against us. We knew what to expect going into it, and this freaking running back they got coming in from Kentucky here this weekend better wrap his butt up. I mean, he and I were together at Oklahoma. I know what he runs with violence, and we better get 11 hats to the ball on this guy, or it's going to be another long night.
Let's get into the series history between South Carolina and Kentucky, because these two do have a big history with each other. This will be the 37th meeting all time between South Carolina and Kentucky. The majority of those, of course, Claire, coming since South Carolina joined the SEC back in the 90s. So since they joined in 1992, it's 20-13 in favor of South Carolina. There was a couple more before that. So South Carolina leads the overall, and they have won the last 3. So in the Beamer era, South Carolina has really liked this matchup in particular. And there's been some big games where they needed a win against Kentucky and they got it. So if we're just looking at this specific era of this series, it is heavily in favor of South Carolina. You know, Missouri was a little back and forth. Vandy really favored South Carolina, but this one, if you're South Carolina, you got to say, okay, we've played well against them these past few years. We've gotten wins. This is a good opportunity for another W ahead of a brutal October that's coming up. So now, Claire, let's get into what's at stake for South Carolina this weekend.
Well, I think there's also something to be said about, like, and I wouldn't necessarily say going into it that this is a get-right game for South Carolina. It certainly could be. But that being said, because this series is historically close, I think it would be good for them that if they were to get a win and get right, that it's a close game and that they actually battle through it. Because if you look at the last 9 meetings, the losing team hasn't scored more than 18 points. And on the flip side, since 2016, the offense hasn't scored more than 24 points. Now, last year, South Carolina scored 31, but there was a defensive touchdown in that. So what's at stake? Obviously, you mentioned this would be 4 wins in a row over Kentucky. It would make them 22, 14, and 1 in the series, 11-6-1 at home, and it would avoid 3 straight losses since the middle of the 2023 season.
Yeah. So to me, look, I don't know if I believe in must-win games in September, but this does feel like a must-win game for South Carolina. When you look at what's coming up, again, we've said it before, we'll say it again. You have LSU on the road. You got Oklahoma coming to town, even though they're dealing with some injuries at their quarterback position right now. Alabama's coming up. October is rough. And when you look at 2-2, there's going to be a big difference in going into that 3-2 compared to 2-3. Like, you really feel like South Carolina needs a win, no matter how it happens. But I know what you mean, though. Like, if they have to battle through it, that could be good for them. But I feel like they need a win just for, like, the morale of the team and to really try and set themselves up for the bye week that's coming next week, and then an October that is going to be tough. It's a hard schedule coming up. So I don't know, Claire. For me, this is a must-win game, and it's an opponent that's 2-1 on the season. Some good wins. They lost to Ole Miss, but a team where a win is there for the taking.
Yeah, I think that a streak is 3 games, right? You don't want to head into more SEC play on a losing streak. And I also think, like, in terms of mentally and the weight of it, being under 500, like, kind of carries a weight to it. And it's hard to get yourself back up after that. So if you stay on the right side of it, and like you said, 3-2 feels a whole lot better than 2-3. And then at least you have another week of wiggle room to, okay, if they fall to 500 again, what does it look like? And I think that I do view it as a must-win game because I think that we've seen that it's a matchup that South Carolina has been able to win before. They've won 3 in a row. It's at home. It's at night at Williams-Brice. They've had 4 weeks of reps with each other. They've faced adversity. They've overcome it in some ways. Now it's like, okay, everything is kind of on your side right now. He said it's looking like on the injury front, they're going to be good for this week. So let's see what you do with it.
Yeah. See if they improve, the things that we've been talking about, the biggest topics regarding the Gamecocks. And also, like, if you can get through it, show those improvements, get through it, get a win. Then you have a couple of weeks to really lock in and really focus on those things with the bye week coming up. And
that's
then
what I was going to say. Then you have the bye week on the horizon.
So to me, it's a crucial part of the season for South Carolina, and to try and correct these mistakes that are really self-inflicted. So many of them. So it's not like they're just going out and people are just putting a beat down on them. So much of what's happening is their own fault.
Right. It's right in their hands. Yes. They just need to take it.
They just need to take it. But on the other side of this matchup is a Kentucky team that's trying to, make their September even worse for South Carolina. Kentucky's 2-1 this season. A couple of their 2 wins were against teams, that they're expected to beat. They lost to Ole Miss by a touchdown a couple of weeks ago. But I talked to Lee Howard, sports director at WKYT in Lexington, to get the Kentucky perspective of this matchup and what the Wildcats are dealing dealing with, because it's not all sunshine up in Lexington either. So here's my conversation with Lee Howard. I'm here with Lee Howard, sports director from WKYT in Lexington. Lee, thank you so much for joining our show. I tell everyone I'm always so honored when people say yes to coming on and wanting to, take 10 to 15 minutes to talk to me. So thanks for coming on to chat Kentucky with us. I'm so excited to, get the perspective of the Wildcats going into Saturday's game.
Absolutely. Great to join you here. And yeah, it's a big game for the Wildcats as they get ready for South Carolina. And I think it's one of those that has become a bit of a rivalry between the two programs. So glad to chat with you about it.
It's been fun. This is one that is a rivalry. There's a reason, that they're going to be future opponents for the next 4 years. And so that was exciting that these two are going to be frequent opponents for the next few years. But when it comes to this year's game, Lee, this one is so interesting because South Carolina has struggled the past couple of weeks. It hasn't been pretty here in Columbia. Kentucky, they've got some question marks going on. So for here, it's been a heavy couple of weeks in Columbia for the Gamecocks. What is the vibe like now up in Lexington?
I tell you, it's different right now, only because they're, after the Ole Miss game, a lot of people were disappointed the way that one ended. And it also introduced Kentucky's backup quarterback, Cutter Foley, who is a local kid who was nationally recruited a couple of years ago by everyone in the country. And you know how it is. The most popular person on the roster is always the backup quarterback. And people had been wanting to see what Cutter Foley could do. He came in 2 weeks ago because Kentucky had a bye week this past week and did really well. Now, that was against an FCS opponent in Eastern Michigan, and not a very good FCS opponent at that. So Cutter looked great, threw a couple touchdown passes, no interceptions. The running game really got going. And I think that game gave a lot of people optimism headed into a bye week. And the bye week probably came at a really good time to further kind of get him adjusted to taking all the first team reps. But even at that, even as optimistic as it is in Lexington compared to maybe in Columbia right now, nobody thinks it's going to be easy to go to Columbia and get a win at Williams-Brice under the lights with sandstorm playing incessantly. So I think Kentucky fans are cautiously optimistic, but also looking forward to seeing what Cutter Foley can do.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you too about that with the quarterback situation. That's been the big topic these first few weeks up in Lexington. Has Mark Stoops, this week, has he said anything about the latest on that situation and how it's developing for them?
Well, the reason that Zach Calzada, who came in as a seventh-year quarterback, former quarterback for Texas A&M, and if you recall, when A&M under Jimbo Fisher beat Saban in Alabama a couple of years ago, was the first time that Saban had been beaten by one of his former assistants. Calzada was the quarterback for A&M at that time, but he got injured, like I said, in the Ole Miss game with his shoulder. And they waited to officially name Cutter the starter for the South Carolina game until this past Monday. So it looks like they've kind of turned the keys over to Cutter. I've always said once you kind of decide to go with a backup quarterback, it's tough to go back the other way. So I think they're ready to live and die with what Cutter can do. Now, this will be his first start in the SEC. He did get in last year as a true freshman. He got into the Texas game in Austin, and he got into the Florida game. Neither performance was great, but that was, like I said, as a true freshman. So I think they're just optimistic and going to roll with him this weekend.
When you look at the rest of what Kentucky's done in their first 3 games, well, let's start with the positives. What has looked good for Kentucky? Even, they did lose to Ole Miss, only by 1 touchdown, though, so it wasn't like they got blown out. But what is Kentucky doing well at the moment?
Well, the run game has always been kind of a staple of Mark Stoops, and that will be the plan going into this game on Saturday. And it's not just because it's South Carolina. This would be the plan going into any game. Is Kentucky's going to try to establish the run early, and control the time of possession, and that will be the plan. Seth McGowan has kind of emerged. Kentucky went out and got 2 transfer running backs in the offseason. Seth McGowan from New Mexico State and Dowell from Wisconsin. Now, Dowell rather was kind of billed as the main guy. He also got a little banged up in the Ole Miss game and didn't finish that game. And McGowan kind of became the bell cow back in the Eastern Michigan game. Scored 3 touchdowns. I think he ranks second or third right now in the SEC in rushing yards and has 6 touchdowns. So I think the combination of Stoops wanting to get that running game going and going into an environment like this with a young quarterback, I would expect to see Kentucky try to run the ball quite a bit on Saturday.
On the other side, every team right now through 3 or 4 games has things that have popped up as the problem areas. What's the problem area or areas for Kentucky right now?
Well, I mean, the passing game, I think that most fans want to see or expected to see that get going better. They got quite a few new receivers. Kendrick Law's a guy that came over from Alabama. Thought a lot about him. Troy Stellato is a receiver that came over from Clemson. And they haven't been able to get those guys going quite like I think the expectation was. Defensively, the defensive line has actually looked really good, a lot better than last year. The secondary has had trouble covering on the outsides. That's kind of been the big thing, kind of giving up some big plays and explosive plays. And look, Kentucky fans know that the key to stopping South Carolina is trying to figure out how to slow down Lenore Sellers, right? And it seems like South Carolina's offense goes as he goes, and he presents such a challenging thing with the way that he can use his legs. He can throw the ball down the field. So I think defensively, that's what they have to do, is try to figure out how in the world to limit Lenore Sellers. Look, I was at the game last year at Kroger Field when South Carolina absolutely ran over Kentucky in all ways and all facets. So they've got to have a better performance if they expect at all to compete.
And when you look at this matchup, we were talking about, for us covering South Carolina here in Columbia, this feels like a must-win game for them after the last 2 weeks. And when you look at how hard their schedule is in October, this feels like a big opportunity for them to try and get some positive momentum in their season. But when you look at Kentucky, they've lost the last 3 times to South Carolina. This is a little bit of a more of a rivalry in this conference. How much do they really want to win this game? Not just for records and all that, but just to beat South Carolina again.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this rivalry has gone back and forth in chunks, right? So there was a time when South Carolina was winning every game against Kentucky, and then there was a time when Kentucky was winning a lot of games against South Carolina. And Shane Beamer has had Mark Stoops' number over the last couple of years. And whether it's correct or not, South Carolina is one of the schools in the SEC that Kentucky fans feel like they should compete with or beat every year. Now, history doesn't always say that's been the case, but that's kind of the feeling. And, after the South Carolina game, Kentucky plays Georgia the next week. then they have Texas, and then they have Tennessee. So, I do think Kentucky's approaching the game much the same way as South Carolina is, in that, like, this is one of those swing games here that you better try to end up on the winning side of this, or your season could go south real quick with the upcoming schedule.
Absolutely. It makes it fun. It feels like there's already stakes in this one on Saturday night. Lee, I want to thank you so much for coming on our podcast, coming on our show. Is there anything else you want to add about Kentucky that we didn't get to touch on that you feel like is important going into Saturday?
I do think it's funny because every year when we go over to practices after they give us a media availability, you always know when it's South Carolina week because they blare Sandstorm and that rooster as loud as they possibly can. So you can be within about a 5-mile radius of Kroger Field this week and hear the loudest rooster you've ever heard. So if anything, they're preparing for the atmosphere. And I love SEC games under the lights, and I love that this is a night game. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what these two teams can provide on Saturday night.
Look, I think sometimes I hear Sandstorm like in my dreams because I've heard it
Sure.
so many times at this point. But that's awesome. That's awesome. Lee, before I let you go, I always like to plug the journalists' handles and everything for people to follow you. If there's any Kentucky fans that are watching this, or just fans of the SEC who want to know what's going on in Lexington, how can people follow you?
Sure. On X is the easiest way, and it's at Howard WKYT. So that's where you can find it.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. I really appreciate you coming on. It was always great to get the perspective of the opponent. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us about South Carolina, Kentucky. Looking forward to a good game on Saturday.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt.
I want to thank Lee Howard for joining the show. I love getting the thoughts of fellow journalists and getting the perspective on the other team. So shout out to local journalists because we work really hard. It's not an easy job. And yeah, shout out to everyone up in Lexington who cover the Wildcats and all their sports. All right, Claire, let's get into our final thoughts and predictions for Saturday night's game. A 7:45 kick for South Carolina versus Kentucky. Last week was the first time we did not pick South Carolina to win a game. I think if it's not a competition, but if someone's going to win, I think you won the prediction game last week. I don't remember
I
what
don't remember
I think
what
I
I
picked
said.
28-14, 35-14.
I think I said 28-24 maybe?
I don't know.
I
You
don't
guys
know.
let us know. Go back and watch it and listen to it. Anyway, what are your final thoughts and predictions for South Carolina versus Kentucky?
We've seen that historically. It's a close matchup. I think it's going to be, again, a lot of question marks still. You have a redshirt freshman in Kentucky coming in at quarterback, redshirt sophomore in Lenore Sellers for South Carolina. South Carolina has the advantage in terms of the atmosphere, starting to make some progress, like we said, but want to see it all come together. I do think South Carolina comes out with a win. I'm going to say 17-14 South Carolina.
Nice. I think South Carolina is going to win this one too, and I think they're going to come out with a different energy with this because I think they're going to feel the must-needness of this whole thing. I think they know. I hope they do too. I think they know in the locker room if they want any shot at a good postseason, this game has to be won. And it's at home. Again, like you said, the circumstances. South Carolina needs to come out with some gusto. I would like to see them just like go for it, just play. So, but I do think it's going to be closer. I don't expect it to be perfect because I don't think that you can correct all of these things in 3-4 days.
Sure.
So I do think there's still going to be some sloppiness. If there's not, that's great for South Carolina, but that's just the realist in me. But I'm still going to pick South Carolina to win. I'm going to say 24-17. I think maybe the offense will have a few more opportunities against this Kentucky team, but I don't think you take anyone lightly in the SEC.
Yeah.
I think there's kind of this mindset that maybe Kentucky's like a pushover win and
Right.
a rollover and like a guaranteed
Yeah, like,
win.
that's a win when you're going through the schedule.
But hey, yeah, they've won 2 of their 3 games.
Yeah.
They were competitive against Ole Miss, who's a top 25 team. I don't think you can take anybody lightly, especially when you had the last 2 weeks that South Carolina's had. I think you got to treat Kentucky with the utmost respect, and I know the Gamecocks will, but even fans, journalists, everybody who's looking at this matchup, I think we got to respect Kentucky and what they're going to bring to Columbia on Saturday. Claire, anything else you want to say?
There was something I wanted to ask you about, and we kind of just touched upon it there. So,
you got to ask me? Oh, I got to get ready. Okay.
Yeah, you're in the hot seat now. So obviously we want South Carolina to be a little mad, feel like this is a must-win situation. And this was a question that came up yesterday during the press conference about leadership, and that there's a different type of leadership this year. And maybe it's like a quiet, just go about your business, do the right thing kind of leadership versus somebody who's going to be really vocal, rally the troops, screaming at everything, giving high fives on the sidelines, pumping people up. Is it concerning to you that they don't have that, or do you think a team has the ability to win and be at that level that this team was expected to going into the season without somebody like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when that became a conversation yesterday, I don't really know if I had thought about it too much, but then I was thinking, I guess we shouldn't really be surprised that they're struggling with leadership because they lost so many alphas, to the NFL. They lost so many experienced veteran guys on both sides of the ball that had been through every situation they probably could have been through as football players to really take that lead. And that was actually, well, I guess we did ask that question to begin the season of, will Lenoris and Dylan and all these guys step up and really, take the team by the horns and lead? But, Lenoris is not that guy who's going to be vocal like that. And I don't even think it's just him. I just think that they're trying to figure out, with all of those losses and all of the people that, moved on to the NFL, graduated, etc., of like, who is going to step up? Maybe I thought it was going to have happened by now, a third of the way through the season. Maybe a little concerning, because I think I guess it's more concerning in these moments, like when they're losing and they need someone to step up, of who's going to be in the locker room saying, all right, like, enough of this. You know,
Yeah.
like, here's what we're going to fix. Here's what we're going to do. Stop moping. Stop crying. Like, whatever it is. So I think if you're in the locker room, and I don't know if this is what it is, but if everyone's just kind of like, okay,
just like every individual
Yes.
going about their
Yes.
own business versus like, hey, we're all a part of each other's success.
Yes.
I need you to step up. I need you to step up. I need me to step
yes.
up.
Like, who's calling each other out in the
Right.
locker room? Who's the one to do that? To just be brutally honest with everybody about the responsibility, accountability. And, you know, Shane said hard conversations are part of the game. It's part of the job. And that's really from his perspective.
Right.
But I think that as a coach, you do have to have people that, like, are just gonna be like, I got this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna tell them what they need to hear. And so if that's not happening, you know, maybe it has happened in the few days since the Missouri loss, because I do think it's gut check time for South Carolina. But if it doesn't start happening soon, I don't know when it will for this team, because we're a third of the way through.
But at the same time, he said he doesn't want somebody just doing it to do it and
Yeah.
it be ingenuine. Like, you know, when somebody is
Yeah.
like cheering you on or like telling you to do something because coach whispered in their ear, hey, go tell him that, which is,
Yeah.
he said he's had to do sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
hey, go give him a high five. Like, you want that to be genuine, especially with underclassmen. You want to have that upperclassman leader that's going to take you under their wing and say, I'm going to show you how to do it. And if you don't get it right, I'm going to tell you didn't get it right, but I'm going to show you how to do it right.
Yeah. And maybe that'll be an interesting question after the game on Saturday, to be like, okay, in this last week, who did you see step up, like really step up to, you know, just say like, all right, let's like wipe the tears, wipe the anger, whatever it is. Let's
Right.
like strap up our cleats and let's go.
Right.
So because everyone leads it different ways, you know, he even said like Spencer Rattler wasn't like a, you know, like we're all like going
yeah.
crazy. He was just led by his play. And sometimes that's what it is. But maybe after this week on Saturday, that would be a good question to be like, in this last 7 days, who did you see? Did you see anybody step up and really take charge of the locker room? So yeah. But yeah, I guess they did lose so much. I guess it's kind of a natural thing to see who's going to rise to the top as the new alpha,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah.
And I think it's also become a bigger conversation, not singling out South Carolina, because this is a conversation that's been going on at Clemson too. With, is this kind of maybe a symptom of NIL? The guys are going for their own individual bag, trying to make their own money. It's like, okay, I need to lock in. I need to do my part. And then maybe they're pressing. They feel like, oh, we're losing. I'm not doing enough. I need to work harder. But it is such a team sport. You need
Yeah.
that guy to do it too. And he might be doing it individually. I'm sure all of them in terms of effort are giving it, but it's just not together. And so one thing I thought of, if maybe this is the future of where college football goes and college sports in general, if it were to be like professional sports in having incentives versus just outright pay. And like, okay, if you hit these milestones during the season, you get this bonus.
Yeah.
And you have like a flat rate or salary or something like that going in. But where you make the big bucks is in what you show out on the field.
Yeah, it's a good conversation, because you do see a lot of the alums from a lot of these schools that did not play in the NIL era who are calling
Yeah.
the teams out, you know, across multiple programs and being like, where's the heart? Where's the fight? Where's all that
Right.
kind of stuff? And
Right.
I don't know if I've seen anyone say that about South Carolina this season, but I've
I don't
seen
think
it.
so. I've seen it about
for a few-
Clemson.
I've seen Clemson. I've seen some of these other programs being like, what's going on? And so it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
You know, are we starting to see the trickle-down effect of this new landscape in college football? But let us know your thoughts on that. That's a really good question. As always, as we wrap up our show, let us know your predictions for this weekend's game between South Carolina and Kentucky. We love scrolling through the comments being like, what's everybody talking about this week? And let us know your biggest concerns, your biggest storylines. What do you hope to see from South Carolina on Saturday night? Because it's a big one. You know, it's they're not taking on an Alabama or an LSU or something, but this is a big one. And I think South Carolina needs to treat this like a playoff game,
Yeah.
you know, because I think it kind of feels that way. You know, when you think about the rest of the season, already 2 losses, it's a must win. I think
5 games tells you a lot about
who a team is.
Yeah.
I think at this point, and we said that last week, last season's over. Last season was last season. We're a third of the way through the season. South Carolina's showing us what this year's team is, and that is what we have to look at now. You know, Virginia Tech, SC State, you kind of still were trickling over last season. That's over. This year's South Carolina team is here. They're showing us what they can do. You know, they're showing us their identity this year, and that's where I think expectations have to go now, and what the analysis and the conversations have to go now is about this year's team and what we're seeing now in September of 2025. South Carolina, Kentucky kicks off at 7:45 on Saturday night. As always, make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, and follow on YouTube or wherever you listen to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon Music. She's Claire Foley. I'm Matt Dowell. We'll see you next time here on SC Sideline.